My coworkers called me the foreign bot, mocked my accent, but still dumped all the tedious work on me. I overheard them betting I'd quit by Friday, so I finished the $5 report early, then sent it straight to the client with my name on every page. I was standing outside the 10th floor conference room of a tech firm in Austin, Texas, holding a stack of printouts I'd triple-checked, when I heard them laughing about me again. Not just laughing, mocking. My accent, my name. The way I speak English like I'm buffering. They thought I wasn't there yet. I was, and this time I didn't walk away. "Dude, I swear he doesn't even get mad," Jard said, snorting. "He just does the work like some foreign bot." "Yeah," replied Melissa, the project manager who pretended to be friendly to my face. "Give him the tedious stuff. He finishes early anyway. Might as well use him." Then the kicker, Evan, the team lead. "He'll quit by Friday. I bet $100. He's too soft. Immigrants like him don't push back." The room erupted in casual laughter, the kind of laughter people use when they think the joke is harmless. But it wasn't harmless. It had been going on for months, always wrapped in jokes, always brushed off with, "Relax, we're just teasing." They never mispronounced each other's names, only mine. They did it on purpose, stretching the syllables into something childish, something they knew would sting. My full name is simple in my home country. Here, it became a punchline. When they finally saw me at the door, the laughter cut off. No apology, just awkward smirks and quick throat clearing, like the problem wasn't what they said, just that I heard it. I walked in without reacting. No one expected anything from me except silence and output. And they were right about one thing. I always delivered. That morning, I opened my laptop at my desk and stared at the files for the dream project they'd shoved onto me because none of them wanted to do the boring data grind. A massive quarterly report, one that the executives needed to finalize a $5 million partnership deal with an investment firm in Chicago. If anything went wrong, the blame wouldn't land on them. It would land on me, the foreign bot. But they didn't know that I'd been quietly keeping score. Every comment, every jab, every mispronunciation. Every time I stayed late, so the team wouldn't look incompetent. They especially didn't know I'd caught wind, too late for them, of the promotion Evan bragged he'd already secured based on the report I was currently building. He'd even said he'd massage the narrative later, meaning he'd put his name on my work and get the credit. That was the moment something in me switched. I felt the anger rise, not loud, not explosive, just steady and cold. A type of anger I hadn't felt since I first moved to America and people treated me like I didn't belong. By Thursday afternoon, I had the report completed. And not just completed, it was flawless. Clean, precise, backed with data points they didn't even know existed. The kind of work that would impress the executive team enough to change the direction of the entire quarter. I sat there at my desk, watching the clock hit 4:17 p.m., the office buzzing lightly around me. Evan stopped by earlier asking if I'd have it ready for him by tomorrow morning because he had to polish it. Polish my work. He had no idea I wasn't planning to hand it to him, not this time. So I smiled to myself, attached the final PDF, and typed a short professional note. Then I hit send. And I didn't send it to Evan. I didn't send it to Jard. I didn't send it to Melissa. I sent it directly to the Executive VP of Operations, Daniel Ruiz. My boss's boss's boss. The man who barely attended floor meetings but always remembered faces and outcomes. The man whose approval could override anyone on my team, including Evan. But before I get to what happened after that email, I need to explain how I ended up in this office in the first place, how I went from eager newcomer to the quiet guy they mocked behind closed doors. I moved to Austin 3 years ago from Newark, New Jersey, where I'd first lived after leaving my home country. Back in Newark, I worked 2 jobs, warehouse nights and call center weekends, just to save enough money to finish community college. English wasn't my first language, but I learned fast. Still, the accent stayed. I used to be self-conscious about it, until I realized it only bothered people who had nothing else to judge me for. By the time I moved to Texas, I had a bachelor's degree in data analytics and a resume full of numbers, efficiency, improvements, system fixes. I applied to the tech firm thinking I'd finally found a place where the work mattered more than the way I sounded. At first, it felt true. My first few weeks were calm, people were polite. The HR manager talked about inclusion and global workforce values. I believed all of it. Then, slowly, the cracks appeared. The mispronunciations started during stand-up meetings. The first time, I laughed along because I thought it was an honest mistake. The third time, I corrected them gently. They corrected me back, incorrectly, like my own name required American approval before being said properly. I realized then, it wasn't ignorance. It was a game. When new clients visited, they kept me off the calls. "We don't want to confuse them," Evan said once. That sentence stayed with me. I wasn't even angry at first, just disappointed in how predictable the prejudice was. You move across the world thinking you're stepping into something better, only to watch the same patterns repeat. They gave me tasks no one else wanted, the boring stuff, the grunt work. They pretended it was because I was detail-oriented, but their smirk said something different. And when I finished early, because I work fast by habit, they just dump more on me. No recognition, no credit. There was one moment that should have warned me about their intentions. Last December, when I built the automation template that cut manual data time in half, I stayed late 3 nights. On Friday, during the presentation, Evan took the credit with a straight face. My name didn't appear once. Not a footnote, not even a verbal acknowledgement. I stood there in the back of the room, smiling like it didn't matter. But inside, I felt something in me harden. Still, I stayed, because I needed the stability. Because I believed hard work eventually showed itself. Because I didn't want to start over again in a new city. Then came the quarterly report, the huge, career-shaping one. The kind of project teams usually fight to lead. But not mine. They tossed it on my desk and acted like they were doing me a favor. And the worst part? I still treated it like an opportunity. Until I overheard that conversation in the conference room. Until I heard them bet I'd quit. Until I realized I wasn't a teammate to them, I was a punchline with a keyboard. So when I sent that report directly to Daniel Ruiz, it wasn't impulsive. It was the result of every little cut, every joke, every fake smile that hid disrespect. And Daniel opened the file within 6 minutes. He replied 2 minutes later, and what he wrote changed everything. Daniel's reply wasn't long. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't even particularly warm. It was 8 words that made my hands go cold. "Please come to my office. Now, Daniel." No explanation, no context, just a summons. I locked my screen, stood up slowly, and walked toward the executive wing. It felt like crossing a border. Everything past the frosted glass looked cleaner, quieter. People moved with purpose. No one looked bored. No one whispered. When I reached Daniel's office, his assistant barely glanced up before waving me in. I stepped inside and saw him leaning over his monitor, my report open on the screen. He didn't look annoyed. He looked impressed, focused, eyebrows tight, eyes scanning the pages like he was hunting for flaws and not finding any. He finally turned to me and said, "Why did this come straight from you and not from your team lead?" For a second, I considered lying. I considered giving him some polished, professional excuse. But then I remembered the laughter, the bet, the stupid nickname, the foreign bot, the way they acted like I should be grateful for scraps. So I told him the truth. Not everything, not the months of comments, not the mispronunciations, not the subtle digs, just the essentials. I was assigned the entire report. They weren't involved, and I wanted you to receive the final draft directly from the person who actually built it. He tapped the desk lightly with one finger, analyzing, thinking, calculating. "You did this alone?" he asked. "Yes. From scratch, yes. On your own time or company hours?" "Both," I said honestly. He leaned back, not a smile, but the closest thing to recognition I'd gotten in months. "This is excellent work," he said, and those words hit me harder than they should have. Like I'd been starved of basic acknowledgement and didn't realize it until that moment. Then he asked something that caught me off guard. "Are you aware Evan has been telling leadership he personally developed this?" I froze. What? He presented an outline last month and implied he had already built most of the internal framework, Daniel said. "That's why I was confused this came directly from you." I felt heat rise in my face, not embarrassment, not shyness, just raw anger. Because of course Evan would do that. Of course he'd try to front-run credit before the work was even done. "I didn't know that," I said, and my voice sounded smaller than I wanted it to. Daniel didn't answer right away. He folded his hands, studying me like he was weighing something important. Finally, he said, "Do not mention this meeting to your team. Not yet. I need to look into some things." Some things. The way he said it felt heavy, deliberate. "Return to your desk," he added. "I'll be in touch." My walk back through the office felt unreal. I could feel eyes on me, Melissa, typing too slowly, jarred, pretending not to stare, Evan, who didn't even look up. They had no idea what was happening behind that frosted glass. The rest of the day passed painfully slow. No one spoke to me except to ask if I was still finishing the report. I said nothing. I just worked quietly, letting them believe whatever they wanted. At 5:02 p.m., Daniel emailed the entire division. Just one sentence. "Mandatory all-hands meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m., no explanation. No agenda." Everyone immediately assumed the worst, but they had no idea the worst wasn't coming for them yet. Not yet. Because the real escalation happened the next morning, when the first major twist hit like a brick thrown through glass. The next morning, the office felt tense in a way I'd never seen before. People were whispering in low, nervous voices. Even the usual loudmouths kept quiet. Evan walked in late, holding his iced coffee like it was a personality trait. When he saw the all-hands notice again on his screen, he groaned loud enough for everyone to hear. "Great, another pointless meeting. Bet it's about budget cuts." I kept my head down. I knew better. At 8:59 a.m., the conference room filled. Everyone from interns to senior analysts shuffled in. Daniel arrived right at 9 o'clock with two people I had never seen before, one from internal audit and one from HR compliance. That alone made the room go still. Daniel didn't smile, didn't joke, didn't even sit. He walked to the front and said, calm and direct, "We've discovered a discrepancy regarding the authorship and management of this quarter's deliverables." My stomach tightened. My hands felt cold. I didn't know how much he had found overnight, but I knew he had found something. He continued, "We received a completed report yesterday afternoon directly from one of our analysts, the full, finalized draft." I watched everyone's heads turn, scanning faces. Evan was nodding like he already knew what Daniel would say next, like he was ready to take the praise. Then Daniel dropped the first bomb. "It was brought to my attention that someone on this team has been presenting false claims of authorship and misleading management about who actually completed that work." A ripple went through the room. People straightened in their chairs. Even the air felt heavier. Evan's smile faltered. Daniel clicked to the first slide of a presentation on the screen. The title read, "Quarterly Report, Authorship Review." He turned to the crowd. "Before we address this, I want to ask the team lead to walk us through his contribution to this project." Every pair of eyes landed on Evan. He looked confused for half a second, then stood, slicked back his hair, and walked up front like this was the moment he'd been waiting for. "Well," he began with a fake modest laugh, "I oversaw the structure. I developed the analytics framework. I guided the direction of the data narrative." Daniel interrupted him. "You developed the analytics framework?" "Yes," Evan said confidently. "I started working on it last month." Which version of the framework did you build?" Daniel asked, like he was giving him one last chance to save himself. The predictive model version," Evan said, picking a phrase that sounded technical. Daniel didn't nod, didn't react, he just clicked to the next slide. The slide showed metadata screenshots, timestamp logs, author history, initial directories, backup versions, edit trails. Every line pointed to me, every single one. There was zero trace of Evan's name on anything except a file he created last month, a file that contained nothing but a blank template and a title slide he never updated. The room went dead silent. Daniel looked at Evan and said, steady and loud, "Your contribution was a blank PowerPoint file. That is the only work you completed." Someone in the back actually gasped. Evan's face turned red, then white, then something in between. This must be a mistake," he stammered. I guided him, I gave him the direction. Daniel cut him off again. "We interviewed the team yesterday. No one recalls you providing any instruction. In fact, several employees confirmed you told them you were waiting for him to finish the boring parts." That line hit the room like a gunshot. I felt every pair of eyes swing toward me. Not mocking this time, not amused, just stunned. Then Daniel delivered the twist that shook the entire team. Internal audit has identified multiple instances over the last year where credit was taken for work not performed. We are opening a formal investigation into misconduct, misrepresentation, and potential fraud. Evan's jaw dropped. Melissa and Jard sank into their chairs, and then Daniel said the words that made my pulse pound in my ears. Effective immediately, Evan is suspended pending investigation. The room exploded into whispers. He tried to argue. He tried to blame me. He tried to call the whole thing a misunderstanding. But no one was listening. Because for the first time since I joined that team, the truth was finally out. And the fallout was only beginning. When the meeting ended, everyone filed out in a stunned, jittery silence. No jokes, no side comments, no fake smiles. Just tension humming through the air like static. Evan didn't look at me when he walked past, security trailing him as he went back to his desk to collect whatever HR allowed. His face was drained, jaw tight, eyes darting like he couldn't believe what just happened. For a second, I felt the tiniest flicker of pity. Then I remembered the bet, the mispronunciations, the stolen credit, the months of making me feel like I was beneath them. That pity died instantly. But here's the thing, even after the suspension, I knew this wasn't over. They weren't going to pin everything on Evan. Melissa and Jard weren't innocent bystanders. They participated. They enabled him. They encouraged the cruelty and did their own share of it. And I realized something while watching them whisper nervously at their desks. This was the first time they were afraid of consequences. They had always assumed I wouldn't fight back, that I didn't know how, that I'd stay quiet because that's what they expected from someone with an accent. They thought soft-spoken meant weak. They forgot where I came from. By lunchtime, my plan had started to form, slow, methodical, and grounded in something colder than anger. Focus. Real revenge wasn't about burning everything immediately. It was about exposing the truth so thoroughly that there was no way they could squirm out of it. I wanted the fallout to be clean, documented, undeniable. And if there's one thing I knew how to do well, it was document everything. So during the afternoon, while the office pretended to work, I pulled up a folder I had been quietly keeping for months. A folder titled simply, Notes. Inside were screenshots, time-stamped emails, Slack messages where they gave me the boring tasks, voice memos I recorded after meetings when they mocked me, logs of who refused to help, who mispronounced my name deliberately during client calls, who took credit for what. I had never meant it to be evidence. At first, it was more like a journal I kept because it felt unfair and I didn't have anyone to talk to. But now, it was leverage. I tightened everything into one clean, professional packet, each section clearly labeled, screenshots cropped neatly, every detail verifiable. No emotion, no commentary. Just facts that spoke louder than any story I could have told. Then I did something that felt risky but necessary. I sent an email to HR and CC'd Daniel. The subject line was simple. Additional context regarding team conduct. Inside, I attached the packet and wrote 5 sentences. Direct, calm, unshakable. I appreciate yesterday's meeting. I would like to provide further information regarding the work environment and the distribution of responsibilities over the past year. These are documented examples of ongoing issues that have affected productivity, communication, and morale. I trust this will assist in creating a clearer picture of team dynamics. Let me know if you need further detail. No blame, no accusations, just proof. I hit send. The confirmation ping felt like something clicking into place. 30 minutes later, HR asked me to come to a follow-up meeting. Daniel was copied again. But right before I left my desk, I noticed something strange. Melissa whispering urgently into her phone, eyes darting from me to her screen, her face pale. Jard looked just as shaken. He was typing fast, then deleting, then retyping, like a man scrambling to rewrite his own history. They thought the worst was Evan's suspension. They had no idea what was coming. Because the second twist, the one they never saw coming, was already on its way. The HR follow-up meeting wasn't just HR. When I walked into the small, glass-walled conference room, Daniel was already there, standing, not sitting, along with the HR compliance lead and someone new. A woman in a charcoal blazer with a badge clipped to her pocket. She introduced herself calmly. I'm Rachel Park, Corporate Ethics and Risk. Risk. That word hit harder than anything so far. I sat down, unsure what this was turning into. I expected questions about the screenshots. Maybe a recap, maybe a warning. But the tone in the room felt heavier, like they weren't just investigating workplace bullying anymore. Rachel opened a tablet and said, "First, thank you for the documentation. It clarified more than you realize." I nodded, waiting. Then she continued, "During our review last night, we discovered something larger that you inadvertently uncovered." I blinked. "Larger how?" She slid the tablet toward me. On the screen was a spreadsheet, one I had never created. A financial one. It showed expense reports, contractor invoices, travel reimbursements, and budget allocations tied to our department. Certain line items were highlighted in red, dollar amounts, repeating vendors, odd approvals, numbers that didn't add up. I looked up slowly. "This isn't mine." "We know," she said. "But your report triggered a cross-check with team productivity metrics. When we compared your documented contributions to what was being reported upward, we found inconsistencies." Daniel crossed his arms, jaw tight. He looked angry, but not at me. Rachel continued, tapping one of the highlighted lines. "For nearly a year, someone in your team has been inflating hours, submitting duplicate contractor invoices, and claiming credit for productivity increases that were exclusively from your work." I stared. I didn't understand. "Wait," my voice felt thin. "Are you saying they were stealing money?" "Potentially," she said. "Enough that we have to investigate it as misuse of company funds." My pulse thudded in my ears. I'd known they were petty, cruel, opportunistic, but this, financial misconduct, fraud tied to inflated productivity. I whispered, "Who?" Rachel exchanged a quick look with Daniel. Then she said it, "Not just Evan." My stomach dropped. 2 additional people appear to be involved in the false reporting and approvals. I knew before she said the names. Melissa Turner and Jared Collins. I felt like the floor tilted under me. I had suspected they were complicit in the credit theft, but not this. Not money, not falsified numbers tied directly to my output. Daniel spoke then, voice low and controlled. "Your documentation already played a key role in unraveling the misconduct. But this goes beyond simple bullying or misattribution. This is a multi-person breach of trust, tied directly to profit-loss statements." I stared at the spreadsheet again. The red lines, the missing hours, the inflated performance claims, the way everything pointed back to tasks I had finished, but that they reported under their names, padding metrics to justify payouts. Rachel continued, "We believe they were using your speed and accuracy as cover. Because you never pushed back, it allowed them to overreport output without triggering suspicion." A cold realization hit me. They didn't just mock me. They didn't just steal credit. They didn't just try to break me down. They used me as a shield, as a scapegoat, as a way to justify financial gain while hiding under the assumption that the quiet immigrant wouldn't question anything. I sat back, swallowing the lump in my throat. Rachel closed the tablet gently. "This will escalate into a formal investigation at the corporate level, but we need you to remain silent about this for now. No discussions with coworkers. No responses to outreach." I nodded automatically, my mind spinning. As the meeting ended, Daniel stopped me at the door and spoke quietly, almost carefully. "Be prepared. Things are going to move fast." But nothing prepared me for what happened next. Because the real reason, the dark, calculated reason behind what they did, came out that afternoon. And it was far worse than anything I imagined. I thought the worst part of this mess was the fraud. I was wrong. The real reason, the why behind everything they did, hit me like a gut punch I never saw coming. It happened late that afternoon. I had just sat down from the meeting with corporate ethics when Daniel walked past my desk and said, barely above a whisper, "Conference room 3. Now." No expression, no emotion, just urgency. When I stepped inside, HR and ethics were already there, same people as before. But this time, no formal introductions, no files, no screens, just tense faces. Rachel closed the door and said, "We need to tell you something before the investigation escalates." My stomach tightened. "Okay." She took a breath like she was steadying herself. "We confronted Melissa and Jared with the expense discrepancies this afternoon." I didn't react. I just waited. Rachel continued, "They didn't deny it. They didn't even hesitate. But the explanation they gave was disturbing." A cold feeling crawled up my back. Daniel stepped in. We asked why they targeted your work specifically, why they funneled tasks to you, why they used your output to inflate their reports. I clenched my jaw, and Rachel looked me dead in the eyes and said, because they believed you wouldn't fight back. They said people like you are grateful to just be here. Their exact words. I felt my chest tighten. Shame, anger, exhaustion, everything tangled together. But she wasn't finished. They also said they assumed no one would question them because, and I quote, everyone knows he's here on a visa. He can't afford trouble. The room went silent. My vision blurred for a second. Not from tears, just shock. A deep, hollow kind of shock that hits when someone says out loud what they've quietly believed about you all along. I forced my voice out. I'm not even on a visa. I'm a permanent resident. We know that, Rachel said quietly. But they didn't, and they didn't care to find out. She opened a folder, slowly revealing printed statements. Not formal ones, notes from their conversation. Their words. They had targeted me deliberately. They had piled work on me deliberately. They had erased my name deliberately. They had mocked me deliberately. They had stolen credit and inflated budgets deliberately, all because they believed my accent made me powerless. But then Rachel read the part that made me feel physically nauseous. They said foreign workers are useful cover because they're less likely to have the confidence to challenge leadership. They also said they expected you to either burn out or quit quietly, quote, before he ever figures out what we're doing. Useful cover, burn out, quit quietly, like I was a tool, a buffer, a human shield they could exploit because they assumed a person like me, someone who came from another country, someone who spoke English with an accent, would rather endure abuse than risk instability. And then Daniel said something even worse. They coordinated the fraud around your productivity because they assumed any discrepancies would be blamed on you. You were the fall guy in every scenario. Everything inside me went cold. Not angry, just numb. I had spent months thinking they were petty, childish, insecure, but this wasn't childish. It was calculated, cruel, strategic, targeted. I wasn't just the office joke. I was the structural support beam of their entire scheme. And the scariest part was how shameless they were when they admitted it. Rachel closed the folder. We needed you to hear the truth before the formal write-ups are issued. You were never imagining things. You were never overreacting. This was intentional, and it went far deeper than hostility or disrespect. I sat back in the chair, breathing slowly, feeling everything inside me settle into something sharp, clear, and icy. Not rage, not panic, just resolve. Because now I finally understood the full extent of what they had done, and I knew exactly how my revenge needed to end. Walking out of that conference room, something in me felt different, like the part of me that kept trying to endure, to be patient, to be understanding, had finally burned away. Not loudly, not dramatically, just cleanly. They had treated me like a tool, a shield, a silent scapegoat. They assumed I would never lift my head, never ask questions, never fight back. They built an entire scheme around the belief that I was too afraid to defend myself. So my revenge wasn't going to be emotional. It was going to be thorough and permanent. That same evening, HR sent me a message. Please do not leave for the day until you have met with us again. When I walked into the conference room, the atmosphere was different from earlier. More formal, more final. Rachel was there, Daniel was there, HR, legal. And 3 folders sat neatly in the center of the table, each with a name on it. Evan, Melissa, Jard. Rachel looked relieved when I took my seat. This will be quick. We're issuing immediate termination notices to all 3 individuals, pending final legal sign-off. The documentation you provided accelerated the entire process. I stayed silent. HR handed me a statement to confirm my experiences. I read it carefully. Every detail was accurate. I signed it without hesitation. As I stood to leave, Daniel stopped me. His voice was steady but different, lighter almost. You saved the company from a potentially massive compliance failure, he said, and you did it with integrity. We'd like to talk next week about increasing your responsibilities formally. I thanked him quietly. I didn't smile, not out of rudeness, but because I was still processing the fact that the people who spent months diminishing me were about to face consequences they never imagined. Walking back to my desk, I saw the end unfolding in real time, security escorting Evan out first. His face twisted in disbelief, like this was all happening to the wrong person. He didn't even look at me. Melissa next crying, insisting she didn't know what she was signing. But she had laughed the loudest when they mispronounced my name. Then Jard, silent, pale, shaking his head at the ground. He had been the one who called me the foreign bot. Now he couldn't even meet my eyes. People from other teams watched from behind computer screens. Not one person stepped in to defend them. Not one person looked surprised. They had all heard the jokes. They had all seen the dynamics. They just never thought it would catch up to them. By 5:15 p.m., the office was quiet, my corner of it even quieter. When I finally shut down my computer and walked out into the warm Austin air, I felt something strange and unexpected. Peace. Not triumph. Not gloating. Just closure. I had come into that job thinking my accent made me a disadvantage. Turns out, it made people underestimate me so deeply they never saw me coming when I finally pushed back. On my way to the parking lot, I checked my phone. One unread email from Daniel. Subject line. About your new role. I opened it and felt a small, quiet smile form, the first genuine one in a long time. Their bet had been that I'd quit by Friday. Instead, by Friday they were gone, and I was promoted.